at Deloitte as a cyber risk practitioner. Today, I'm going to talk to you about ethics in cybersecurity. First, I want to go over the agenda, just give you an overview of cybersecurity and ethics in general, and then how it relates to cybersecurity. Following that, a definition of it so that we are working from the same baseline. There are many different definitions of ethics, and we want to make sure that for the purposes of this presentation, we are all using the same one. Then I want to talk to you about some ways that you can plan, prepare, and position yourself for uncomfortable or difficult situations where ethics come into play. Whether your role in the workforce is a penetration tester, an information security system manager, or a system user, you will likely face ethical dilemmas on a recurring basis. How are you prepared to handle this kind of situation? And you may ask yourself, how is this related to cybersecurity? Cybersecurity practitioners have diverse backgrounds that include computer and data science, engineering, law and policy, mathematics, philosophy, forensics, and others. Each practitioner will have a different perspective on what ethics means, and without a baseline, the industry places a significant burden on the individual to make the best decision in a given situation. In this webinar, we will explore an ethical framework to assist you in making decisions related to ethical issues you may encounter through your work as a cybersecurity practitioner. We're going to talk about ways to plan for anticipated situations, prepare for unforeseen situations, and then how to position yourself for making decisions without compromising your integrity. What is the first thing most people do to find an answer for something? Go to a search engine, right? And if I type in the search string cybersecurity ethics in a Google search, the top hit contains the quote here. Whether we agree with the search engine results, it is important to at least acknowledge them and recognize that many people will use this as their primary method of education. If we want to understand or influence others, it is beneficial to see things from their perspective, even if we disagree with it or think we have a better approach. Here we have ethics, moral principles that govern a person's behavior. It is a critical part of any sound cybersecurity defense strategy. You might hear the term defense in depth. It's been around for a few years. This is part of a defense in depth strategy. As we all know, humans are usually the weakest link in any security solution. And if we are not properly training and educating the humans, then we're leaving the weakest link vulnerable. What does it mean to be an ethical cybersecurity practitioner? Ethics are influenced by people's values, their background, and personal beliefs. While some values may be universal, such as do no harm, that does not mean that all values are ordered the same or given the same significance in all cultures and countries. Although ethics are subjective to a certain extent, standardizing the training and discussion on the topic will enhance the practiced ethics in cybersecurity and ultimately the cybersecurity defense strategy. As we talk about planning, there are common situations and circumstances that lead to ethical dilemmas that can be learned and researched to help create a plan. As we look to prepare, we can include general ethical principles, professional responsibilities, and leadership principles. And to help us position, we consider the various perspectives and alternative actions to make a decision that will lead to the most beneficial outcome. Let's talk about planning. The occurrence of many ethical issues are widely known and can be anticipated. The cybersecurity practitioner should be aware of these and have a plan for how to handle them. This doesn't mean that for every situation you can know what you may encounter. However, history can teach us that there are several situations that occur frequently or are industry specific, and we can take note of those to better ourselves as cybersecurity practitioners. Here's a common topic that you can plan for. When you encounter controlled information throughout the course of your work, there are several points of consideration here. Most of this information will be governed by law or policy, but if it is not clearly marked or you are uncertain, you should have a plan on how to handle the situation. Many of us are well acquainted with PII, PHI, and how to handle these. PII can range from very sensitive information, such as your national identifier in the US. This is a social security number. It can include your date of birth, and then it can also go down to less sensitive information, such as your street address, telephone number, or maybe an email address. And then for PHI, this can range from what kind of prescriptions you may have, what procedures have been completed, and general health conditions, as well as your primary care provider and other health details. These are heavily governed by law. Here in the United States, we have the HIPAA, high-tech laws, as well as some public law that governs the use of PII. These are easy to learn about and educate yourself so that you can understand how to handle these if you encounter them through the course of your work. Proprietary information is not always legally protected. However, it is just as sensitive in some cases, especially to your client or your organization. These can include personnel and financial records, trade secrets, and even bid and proposal work for prospective new clients, or work that you are looking to find a contractor to perform the work. If you discover indicators of compromise, which is quite common if you're doing penetration testing work, you need to know how to handle this. In some cases, these could indicate an insider threat, and simply using the normal process when you notify the organization can further compromise an individual or the entire organization. These may implicate other clients or cause unintended consequences by revealing the discovery through the normal process. It's important to have a plan on how to address these before you start performing the work. This could be ad hoc requests, such as a 2-week assessment, or this could be an enduring contract support that lasts several years. In either case, it's important to know how to handle this type of information. Finally, we have a category, prohibited information. This can include adult website content, gambling, unauthorized VPN clients, or others. It's critical that as ethical cybersecurity professionals, you take the time to request how these information types should be handled before you perform the work. Similar to an insider threat, you can cause other second or third level effects by revealing this information in an improper manner. Let's look at another topic, business practices. Some of these you may not immediately consider to be cybersecurity ethical issues. Others may be obvious. You should have a plan for each one of these top-level categories, especially the listed examples. Let's talk through the reasons why these are critical. Account sharing is typically a prohibited practice in any organization. However, it is common that as cybersecurity professionals, we discover the use of this. Sometimes people treat us as a confidant and tell us information they would not otherwise share with their coworkers or other professionals. And sometimes it's even in a casual manner, including jokes. But this is a serious infraction, and we need to take care with how we report these. Account sharing can include the username and the password or other types of credentials, such as smart cards or soft tokens. Equipment sharing, likewise, is usually prohibited. However, there are some cases where this is allowed and actually beneficial, such as a hot desk or some sharing space where you have an internal cafe of workstations where people can come in and use the equipment. In this case, you may find someone has left their password or other sensitive information written down, stuck under the keyboard or left on the monitor. And it's important to understand how to handle this. You should be very familiar with your organization's practices on how to treat sensitive information that's discovered in shared office space. Finally, we look at physical security. Going back to the earlier statement that humans are usually the weakest link, physical security that involves humans can add additional vulnerability for an organization. And we need to understand how to handle this in an ethical manner. How many times has someone come in behind you and said, "Oh, I forgot my badge. Can I just walk in with you?" Most of us know this to be the term tailgating. In some cases, this is allowed for such as visitors that aren't issued visitor ID cards in a building. And in most cases, it's not. So how is building access handled for your organization? How is it handled at the client site? What do you do when you see it happen? If it's not you, do you just ignore it and go about your business? Or do you take the time and speak to the person, ask them, do you have an escort? Did you stop and get a badge at the visitor's desk? Now that we've talked about how to plan and which situations we need to plan for, let's talk about how to prepare. In many of these situations where you need a plan, making the plan or executing the plan is not always done the same way. Now we can look at some methods for helping you prepare and how to handle these ethical dilemmas. Having an open mind can often lead you to the best decision in a complex ethical dilemma. As I mentioned earlier, some of ethics is subjective in nature. And the reason why training such as this is important is to provide awareness so that we can all start from the same baseline and have a fundamental understanding of what issues can cause ethical dilemmas and how you can handle those. One way to prepare for ethical situations that develop from discovering controlled information is through the rules of engagement. This is a document used for any kind of assessment that clearly defines how certain situations will be handled by the assessors and the organization being assessed. In some cases where you have a red team versus blue team, there's a concept of a white team or purple team. And these are the trusted agents that will accept the information from the penetration testing team and handle it appropriately in their organization. This is to prevent things such as exercises and other assessments from interrupting real-world operations. Taking the time to read through the rules of engagement carefully and consider all of the ethical situations that you're aware of will help you make the best decision and prepare yourself for those situations. A common way to address this is also a code of ethics. Many certification bodies have these and are required to sign when you complete the exam or prior to taking the exam. Is signing a code of conduct sufficient for proper ethical accountability? What about having a few test questions on the exam? Is this sufficient? We should all be taking a step beyond that and completing training and awareness education such as this webinar. Some general principles that you might see in a code of ethics are contribute to society and well-being, avoid harm, be honest and trustworthy, be fair, do not take action to discriminate, respect the work required to produce new ideas, inventions, and other proprietary type work, respect privacy, honor confidentiality. I mentioned earlier that sometimes you will be given someone's password or knowledge of password sharing because someone looks to you as a person of confidence and tells you these things. In some cases, they just blurt it out, and confidence is not even a consideration. In either case, you should treat this information as it's required by the organization. Several of these codes of conduct include professional responsibilities and leadership principles. In some cases, especially for government agencies, your client may already have a plan in place, including additional required training for you to complete prior to performing any work or gaining access to the system. Even if your client does require training, it is still imperative that you train and educate yourself. Make sure you have awareness of common situations where an ethical concern may happen. Open source research, including reading books, trade journals, and other publications, are simple and will provide you a solid baseline of understanding that will prepare you for many situations. Now that we've looked at ways to prepare, let's talk about how to position yourself for making decisions without compromising your integrity. Integrity is the foundation of many organizations, especially those who are providing people services to their clients. When you do not have a physical product, people are the most important, and maintaining integrity is often the most important trait for your people. As we're thinking about how to maintain integrity, we should consider alternatives. Advice given earlier in this webinar was to maintain an open mind. When you put yourself in the other person's perspective, then you're able to understand their position better and then take action which makes sense for that situation. What kind of alternatives should we consider? Which alternative best protects the moral rights of individuals or the organization? Which alternative would be the most just? While we're not all legal advisors, I think most of us have a general idea of what is a just outcome. Which alternative would lead to the best overall consequence? Which alternative promotes the common good? Which alternative would help one develop and maintain a virtuous state of character? Again, going back to maintaining your honor and credibility. These are some of the alternatives that you can consider. Sometimes a person will find themselves in a situation and not understand how they got there. And by taking a moment to consider the alternatives and the perspectives of others involved in the situation, you can help find a way out of it that makes the most ethical sense for a cybersecurity practitioner. As an example, if someone comes to you with confidential information and tells you that they were asked to share it with someone else who is not authorized to see the information, how would you handle that situation? Would you handle it differently if the person asking you works for the same organization as you do, such as an employee or colleague? Would you handle it differently if the person is a stranger? How would you handle it if it's the client yourself that's asking you the question? How do we even look at these situations and maintain integrity? Well, first of all, we can consider principles that are important. Two important principles that you may have heard at other times in your life also apply to ethics and cybersecurity. Surround yourself with people that have similar values. In some cases, you may have heard this phrase differently, such as birds of a feather flock together. It's a common one here in the United States. And then other phrases that basically communicate the concept of whatever you are around and whatever you are exposed to is going to influence your decision making. So if you spend time going to trade shows and community events and conventions that have cybersecurity professionals in them, and you ask questions and you listen, you're surrounding yourself with people that have the values that you want to emulate. This is an important concept for ethical behavior. Another principle is be aware of low integrity situations that pop up in your daily life, especially with social media. Today, it's a different world than it was 20 years ago with the internet and social media, ubiquitous access from any device, whether you're at home or you're out somewhere or you're in the workplace. You can basically access information anytime, anywhere. This allows you to be exposed to information and situations that previous generations did not have to deal with in the same manner. And being aware of this and recognizing the warning signs will help you make better ethical decisions as a cybersecurity practitioner. For example, if you're in your client workspace, should you be browsing personal social media sites during that time? And then what happens when you see a post that affects you personally and you have some reaction to it? Do you take time to post a response? Do you have a lengthy discourse? How much productivity have you lost during that time? What if in the midst of posting that, the client walks by and feels differently about the position that you're typing on your mobile device about? Does that affect your client relationship? Will that compromise your integrity as a cybersecurity practitioner? Thinking about these situations before they happen will help you maintain your integrity in the situation. Something you may have heard in your personal life applies here too. When you plan to go out and have a night of drinking or partying, make a plan on how you get home first. That same principle applies as a cybersecurity practitioner. If you know that you will be entering a situation, you're performing an assessment on an organization that's been in the news, and you know that simply doing the work can be controversial. Take time to consider all of the things that could happen, and if something that you don't think will happen, how can you at least mentally prepare yourself on how to reason that situation out once you find yourself in it? Finally, to help maintain integrity, you have to think about the impact. How will a decision affect me? How will it affect my client? How will it affect the organization I represent? Going back to the controlled information, what happens if I decide to share this information with someone else, even if I do it in secret? What happens when that's discovered? Think about some of the financial crises in the past 20 years. Some of that information was shared illegally or unethically, and then the business ends up going bankrupt. A lot of people lose money in the process, and then confidence in the whole system is degraded. When you think about the impact to your client, can your actions cause the client to lose their job? Can it cause you to lose a contract with that client? Can it prevent further work from the client ever happening? What about as yourself as an employee? How will this reflect on the organization's that employs you. These are all the things that you need to consider as part of the impact. Okay, let's summarize what we've talked about today. We've talked about how to plan for anticipated situations. These are the ones that commonly occur and are frequently documented. You can spend time reading, watching videos, or simply talking with fellow cybersecurity practitioners on how to learn how to plan for these. Once you have a plan for the anticipated situation, we talked about how to prepare for unforeseen situations. Maybe the general topics and ideas are known, but how it's going to play out is completely unknown. And what are ways that you can prepare for these so that the impacts are minimized and you know what to do. Finally, we talked about positioning yourself so that you're not compromising your integrity based on the decisions you make in these ethical situations. I want to thank you for tuning in today to this webinar, and I hope that you will continue the journey on educating yourself in ethics and cybersecurity.